If you've seen any cruise related news in the last day or so, I guarantee you've seen the news stories that say Norwegian Cruise Line are going bust, everybody panic, it's a massive crisis, and it's not. Norwegian Cruise Line are not going bust, and I'm going to tell you why. Before we get into the video and find out what has changed everything today, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss any future videos. This news story came about because Norwegian Cruise Line had to fill in an 8K filing form. That's something that big companies do, and they have to do it to show what would happen in the absolute worst case scenario. Basically what Norwegian said is, in the worst case scenario, if they didn't have any cruises for an entire year and they did nothing, they might go bankrupt. And I think that's fair for any company. If they don't have revenue for a year and they do nothing about it, they're likely to go bankrupt. I don't think these news stories that have said Norwegian Cruise Line may go bust are really helping anyone. Big companies have to fill out this form. They have to think about the worst case scenario. If they didn't and something did go wrong, they would be accused by their shareholders of hiding things. So they have to think about the worst case scenario. And I personally don't think that's a bad thing. I would much prefer the cruise lines to be prepared for a worst case scenario, 12 months of no sailing, than just sticking their head in the sand and ignoring it. Like all of the other big cruise lines, cruises have been cancelled for Norwegian Cruise Line. They were cancelled from mid-March time up until the end of June at the moment, but that's being continually extended. No one knows when we will be sailing again. They don't know when they're going to get any revenue, and at the moment, their currently monthly cash burn is between 110 and 150 million dollars. That's how much cash they're burning through just by doing nothing during this situation. Norwegian Cruise Line have 28 cruise ships and they're all not sailing. It's actually very interesting to see where they are. They tend to be clustered together, so you've got Pearl, Gem and Sky near Jacksonville, Dawn, Breakaway, Getaway and Sun near Orlando, Encore, Spirit and Bliss near Norfolk. This is the American Norfolk, this is not the Norfolk in the UK. Star, Epic and Escape near Miami, and Jewel and Joy are near California. As of April 17th, apparently 50% of people who have had their cruises cancelled for the summer have asked for a refund, so that's a massive amount of cash that Norwegian has to find from somewhere. Despite that, Norwegian Cruise Line are not going bankrupt. I'm not saying that they'll never go bankrupt, they might do one day, but they're not imminently going bankrupt. They've managed to raise $2 billion to help them get through this situation, providing for a worst case scenario. Hopefully things are going to be much better than this. So how exactly do you raise $2 billion? They did it in a few ways. The first way is that they created loads more shares in the company that didn't exist before to try and raise some capital. They actually are offering 36,363,636 shares at $11 each. I don't know why it's 36363636, but that is quite a good looking number. So that's going to give them loads more liquidity. They did a few other things with convertible bonds. They're kind of shares that it's like an IOU. It's strange. I don't think we need to go into that in this video, but that's going to give them loads more money. And they did actually have a private investment that's going to be $400 million. So they have managed to raise everything that they need to survive 12 months without a single sailing. Looking back to before COVID-19, Norwegian Cruise Line were in a really good position. For the first 2 months of the year, the ships sailed full at prices that were higher than the year before, despite a really healthy capacity growth of approximately 7%. So not only is there increased demand for cruising, the prices could be higher and they would still fill their cruise ships. That does seem like a distant memory at the moment. I should point out that the company that has got this $2 million is Norwegian Cruise Line Holdings. They own Norwegian Cruise Line, but they also own Regent Seven Seas and Oceania Cruises. So it's not just Norwegian Cruise Line that are within this whole thing. At the end of March, Norwegian actually had $1.8 billion worth of pre-sales, so sales for cruises that are going in the future. The numbers do sound very big, they do sound very scary. Norwegian Cruise Line, like every other cruise line, is completely hemorrhaging money at the moment because nothing like this has ever happened before. But they will be okay, at least for 12 months with no sailings, which I really hope isn't going to happen. If you do have a cruise book with Norwegian Cruise Line, I personally would not be worried about it if it is in the next year, the next 2 years. There are so many things that a cruise line could do before it goes bust. They're not just going to disappear and you'll lose all of your money. They could sell cruise ships, they could sell their private islands. There's loads and loads of options for them. In a complete worst case scenario, you could always get your money back through your credit card provider. If you've paid through PayPal, you're covered that way. So don't worry that you've booked a Norwegian Cruise Line cruise, they're going to go bust and you're going to lose everything, because that is so unlikely that I don't even think we need to think about it. This has been a really tough time for Norwegian Cruise Line, but it's been a really tough time for every cruise line. Looking at it now, Norwegian in one of the strongest positions, they will be just fine. They were in a really good position before this crisis. They can deal with a year of no sailings, and then we will return to cruising. Norwegian are actually offering really good incentives to not ask for a refund. If you do have a cruise that is cancelled with Norwegian Cruise Line, you can ask for a refund. You're likely to have to wait between 60 to 90 days for that refund. But if you don't, you'll get 125% of the amount that you spent on that cruise to use on a future cruise. And if you book a cruise in the end half of 2020, you're going to get an extra 20% discount. So Norwegian, it does feel like they're really trying to look after their customers, and I think people will return to them. I'm personally a massive fan of Norwegian Cruise Line, and as soon as I can, I will be back on board a Norwegian Cruise Line cruise. I understand that this is really a scary time. I don't think the way that the news covered this with Norwegian Cruise Line may go bust was helpful for anybody. You know, you could say Emma may die. Yes, but how does that help anybody? It's just completely irrelevant. If you are considering getting a refund, I do have a video all about how the refunds are actually working in practice. It's all very well knowing what these cruise lines say they're going to do, but it's nice to know sometimes, isn't it, who's got their refund, who did what with it. So I'll link to that video in the description. I have to admit, I do worry about some cruise lines. I worry about some of the smaller British cruise lines, the Greek cruise lines, the Italian cruise lines, but the big American cruise lines, I'm not worried about them personally. The big American cruise lines are at the moment left out of any bailout plan from the US government because they do use flags of conveniences. They're not registered in America, even though they are American companies, so they're kind of on their own. That said, I think really what we need to worry about more than anything is what's going to happen with cruise prices. We don't know if cruise prices are going to increase massively. I'm hoping that they will drop, but we'll have to wait and see. It may be the case that even though you've got 125% onboard credit, trying to book a cruise for next year is so much more expensive that you kind of don't really gain anything from that extra credit. That's the thing that I would personally worry about. And if you're not sure that you do definitely want to cruise again, you definitely want to cruise with this cruise line again, take the refund. I've taken a refund for my Carnival cruise just because I don't know when I'm going to be able to cruise with Carnival again. There's nothing wrong with taking a refund, but if you can keep it with the cruise line, it does help them and you do have something to look forward to then, which is always good. I have to apologise if I've got a little bit passionate in this video. It really annoys me when I see these big news companies and they say things like Norwegian Cruise Line going bust, because the people that are reading that are people with Norwegian Cruise Lines booked who are really worried about it. I've had so many messages saying, I don't know what to do, what's going to happen? And it's just not fair on those people. Norwegian Cruise Line didn't fill out this form for their cruisers. What they did is they sent out a press release saying everything's fine, we're raising some extra money to try and get through the next year, but it's okay. But no one covers that story because that's not as interesting as this very small sentence. Let me just read to you what this actually says. So it says there's substantial doubt about the company's ability to continue as a growing concern, assuming that no additional financing or other proactive measures are taken. So that's basically saying if there are no cruises for 12 months and Norwegian do nothing, they don't do any further cost cutting, they don't raise any extra money, the company may go bankrupt. Which, how is that a news story? That's not interesting. If any company just stops and waits for 12 months with no revenue and doesn't cut anything, everyone's gonna go bankrupt. Thank you for watching this video. Please do subscribe and I'll see you next time.